Still do that.
How appropriate on Mother's Day. Now we need a pole for them to dance on.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's all right. It wasn't you.
I got you laughing there, though.
That sounds so good on this Calliope.
Yes, it does.
They dance to this too.
Yeah, but not pole dancing.
This is a tribute to Eileen right here.
Oh, now see, this is going to get put on the internet. You didn't want to say that.
Oh. I don't care.
Well, it's not like they're going to
Hey, she actually taught me this. But she didn't teach me this arrangement.
Okay.
I learned most of it from the American Queen.
I was so hoping you were going to stick with that 1353.
No. Sharp. Ooh.
Hello, and how are you? Welcome in for what is essentially me sitting around and talking to you for a while longer. Let me see if I can adjust the color on this thing just a little bit while we're talking here, because quite frankly, it's pissing me off a bit that it's really dark. It hasn't been this dark the whole time, so we're going to see what we can do about that real quick. Well, the answer is apparently nothing. There's nothing I can do about it. Very sorry. Hold on one second. I'm going to adjust this light back to where it was so I don't look like I'm washed out and elderly. There we go. That's about the best as we're going to get right now. Unfortunately, the setup here is just not really great in my den. I can turn on one light in the back. But it washes everything out when I do that as well. So, we're just going to have to deal with this. Welcome to what is really kind of the first stream I'm doing of anything like this. Well, sort of, guys, what this is kind of a front porch type of stream. Back home, in the spring, in the summer, in the early fall, one of the things we used to do is we'd all get together on the front porch. And you'd sit there and you'd look out at night and you'd sing songs, you'd tell stories. You just kind of bullshit about your day. And if you were one of the older people, you would drink, normally a lot, and just kind of move forward from there. So I'm looking over at the chat. My alcohol for the evening is the same Colorado whiskey I was drinking last night. Stranahan's Colorado whiskey given to me by a very nice green thing at Anthrocon. I see in the chat we have Tien Long, we have Kage. Hello, both of you. The Boozy Witch Project. No, that's where I put the camera completely up my nose. So I'm going to pour myself the first shot of the evening. And then I want to tell you all something about the Calliope music that we were just listening to. To you, to me, to all of us. The Calliope music we were just listening to was a collection from 3 different boats. The Delta Queen, the Belle of Louisville, and the Natchez. All 3 of those are actual steamboats. None of them are these faux diesel-powered with the little electronic paddle wheel that looks real nice boats. All of those actual steamboats, steam-powered, steam-driven, not at all fake in any way, shape, or form. The Belle of Louisville of the 3 of them is the oldest, and I have a picture for you right here that I want to show you because I'm very proud of this, and you're going to see why here in a second. This is the steamer Belle of Louisville. She was built as the Idlewild back in 1914. She was actually built not too far from where Anthrocon's held at the J. Reese & Sons shipyards in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Belle of Louisville was my boat. That was the boat that I worked on for a number of years and greatly, greatly enjoyed working on. The last set of songs we heard, with the 2 men talking in the background, that was actually from the Belle of Louisville's Calliope, that clicking that Kage kept saying they've got to oil the valves. That was the keyboard. It has an actual brass keyboard. The person who played that, the songs there, the stripper, which was the first one, where they were saying about how appropriate for Mother's Day, is a song called The Stripper. The person who was playing that is named Josh Kaplinger. Josh is blind. He's never been sighted. He's never been able to see in his life. He learned to play the Calliope by sound and by feel alone. And when he said, I learned this arrangement from the Delta Queen, or the American Queen, what he was talking about was the American Queen, which is now, I think, a casino. But at the time that this was being played, or shortly before this was being played, it was the largest boat on the Western Rivers and the largest steamboat in the United States. It was an overnight steam vessel. Josh learned how to play that song and that arrangement of that song by sound and touch alone. The other voice on that is Travis Vasconcelos. Travis is a very interesting man. I spent many, many nights drinking with Travis. If you've heard my story about having 10 shots of tequila leading up to New Year's Eve, Travis is the friend that I interrupted in that. And if you haven't heard it, it's actually at the end of the IFC monkey knife fight set that I did with Kage. So the point of all of this, it is to tell stories, and it's to have a little bit of fun. And tonight's kind of a mix. I'm calling it Rivers and Revenants. Revenants is a fancy word for ghost, and Rivers is rivers. I'm using a new camera, so bear with me. I'm still trying to get used to focusing on this abomination that's on top of my computer screen rather than looking down here where the old one was. So, I said I worked on a steamboat. I worked on the Belle of Louisville. The Belle of Louisville started life in 1914 as the Idlewild. She was built at J. Reese & Son Shipyard in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The engines are the only part of the boat that wasn't built there. The engines were actually recycled from another steamboat, and the reason we knew this is there were plates, brass plates on the front of the engines that said J. Reese & Sons, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but Pittsburgh was missing the H. For a very short period of time, between like 1898 and 19-something, Pittsburgh was spelled without the H. So we know the engines are from around there. The boat itself that they came from, no clue. No idea. The Idlewild was built as what we call a packet steamboat. Packet steamboats kind of moved freight and people up and down the river. They did day trips. They did excursions. The Idlewild was a packet steamer. Shortly before World War II, she was renamed the Avalon. She was renamed the Avalon at the request, or shortly after World War II, she was renamed the Avalon. She was renamed the Avalon at the request of Captain Ben Winters. Captain Ben Winters was a mean son of a bitch. He headed up the boat, and he had in that boat at that time on the dance floor, which we called the boiler deck, right above the boilers, hot as hell. You think you've seen heat, you have experienced nothing until you have been on the deck directly above the boilers of a steamboat in the middle of August. But he had lined that deck, which was a dance floor from the boat's old USO days, with slot machines. And one night while the boat was pulled in to a wharf on one of its excursions, it was a tramp steamer, meaning it went from town to town. One night as it was pulled in, Captain Ben Winters was in the captain's quarters sleeping, and the sheriff raided the boat. During the sheriff's raid, Captain Winters had a heart attack and died in the captain's quarters. His last wish was that the boat be renamed the Avalon. The Avalon was the name of the first steamboat he had ever worked on. In 1963, the Avalon was laid up in Cincinnati. The company that owned it went completely bankrupt. There was, at that time, a cub pilot and mate. A cub pilot was a pilot who was just learning the river. And he was a first mate named Doc Holly. Doc Holly paid out of his own pocket to winterize the boat, and that means draining all the pipes. Otherwise, when the river froze, the pipes would freeze. Everything that brought the water into the boat to make the steam would freeze and burst, and the boat would be unsalvageable. He paid to winterize it, have everything drained, have it packed, have it made ready for winter so that the boat wouldn't burst and sink out of his own pocket. The next year, Jefferson County, Kentucky, purchased the boat at auction by Judge Marlowe Cook, and they brought in now Captain Doc Holly and an engineer named Alan Bates, who would later become Captain Alan Bates. And they made it into what is now the Belle of Louisville, which is an excursion steamer. It is the oldest continuously operating and oldest period Western Rivers paddle wheel steamboat in the United States of America, and there is not one bit of the propulsion system on that boat that is newer than 1920. There are no props, there are no diesel engines. Up until about the 70s, the generators were steam powered, and the backup steam generators are still on the boat. It's ran just how they used to in the old days, with two steam powered levers that move this giant pilot wheel. There have been safety and navigation updates because the Coast Guard did require them. It still runs as a day steamboat. The Belle of Louisville is just this kind of beautiful, amazing boat. But I worked on the Belle of Louisville, and part of my job was doing third shift night watch. It was fire watch is what they called it, or fleet watch. The Coast Guard required that there be a crew member on the boat 24 hours a day. As part of your work on the boat, you would do this night watch. You had this big, heavy watchman's clock that you had to walk around the boats with, and there were these keys in random positions all over it, and you put them in the clock and you turn it, and inside the clock was a paper strip. And the paper strip went around, and every hour there would be a new slot there, and each key would leave an imprint. In the mornings, the mates would pull the paper, look at it, and they'd be able to tell whether you had actually made your rounds or not. And they took you all over the boat. And that became an issue because Captain Winters as I said earlier, was not a very nice man. There was a story, it was not apocryphal, it was actually confirmed, where the captain had a dispute with an engineer. So he ordered this engineer back onto the fantail of the boat. Now, to explain it, the fantail is this area right off the engine room. So here's the boat itself, right? On the two sides are these little areas, and then right in the middle is this paddle wheel. And the paddle wheel is ran by these big, heavy steel and oak pitman arms that just do this to turn the paddle wheel. And you'd have to go out and check and oil the pitman arms if you were one of the engineers. Captain Winters, in a heavy fog, ordered one of the engineers out to check the pitman arms while the boat was laid up. When he knew this engineer was back there, he ordered the boat to go full steam astern. We had to back up, knowing that this man was bent between the rail and the pitman arm. So he's bent like this, and the pitman arm comes down, and he's no longer bent like anything. That was Captain Winters in a nutshell. He was described as a very foul, very mean old man. And you have to remember, they changed the name of the boat from the Idlewild to the Avalon as his deathbed wish. In 1963, when the Belle of Louisville, or the Avalon was renamed the Belle of Louisville, people started having issues late at night on the watches. The issues would go from anything from a sighting of a man in an old-styled captain's uniform wandering the boat, to uncomfortable feelings, to people being pushed down the narrow staircase between the captain's quarters and the pilot house on the highest point of the deck. People would think they saw faces in mirrors. And I worked night watch many, many times on that boat, and I have to say it was between just the hours of 2 in the morning to 4 in the morning, which were the nighttime cruising hours, where the boat, it would normally finish up much of its work from the prior night's cruise and then go to the next town. It was a very uncomfortable place to be. It was very hard to explain because, 1:30, 1:45, 1:50 being on the boat, it wasn't uncomfortable. Between 2 and 4, it was very uncomfortable. It was very, very unnerving. And it would get even more unnerving because you would have to be working in almost total darkness. See, we didn't just get to sit in the deck boat, which I have stories about that as well, and make our rounds. We would have assignments on the boat overnight. And you're the only one on this deserted wharf at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. This entire city of 1 million people is just quiet. There's nothing. Maybe the sound of a truck going across the highway near the wharf. But the whole area is silent. One story that I had heard was there was the year that they put in the life jacket lockers. The life jacket lockers had not always been on the dance floor, and one year they decided they were going to cut down the seating, and they were going to build life jacket lockers to store all the life jackets in the dance floor area. And that was done over the winter. And the person who worked overnight would have to go in and do work in those lockers all over those lockers all night long, and stop and put down his paintbrush or whatever he was doing to make the rounds. One night, a night watchman was in the locker, and the boat was kind of weird. It had motion sensors on the main deck only, which is the deck where you come in on the bow and you go in, but nowhere else in the boat, just the main deck, because you couldn't get anywhere else without going through the main deck. So you would go on your rounds, you'd come back, and if you were working on one of the upper decks, you'd set the alarm, and then you'd go up. And this watchman's sitting there in the life jacket lockers, and he turns around, and there's an older gentleman in kind of raggedy clothes staring at him as he's working, just standing at the top of the staircase to the main deck, staring at him as he's working. So it wasn't, unfortunately, that uncommon for things like that to happen, because the wharf did attract homeless people. So the watchman turned and he said, "Sir, you can't be on this vessel. We're closed to the public right now. I need you to come down with me to the watch room. and I need to just take down your information for the watch log, because anytime something happened on the shift, you had to fill out a watch report. He says that, and this man stares at him and then turns and walks down the staircase. And the watchman at that point was thinking that he had just forgotten to set the alarm. But he gets to the bottom step, and right as he's coming off the bottom step onto the deck, he hears the motion sensor start beeping for him. It hadn't beeped moments before when somebody was going down. It was beeping now, though. So he sets his foot down on that deck, and it's beeping, and he goes over and he disarms the alarm. And then he notices the bow door is closed. And this was important because the bow door is this big metal thing on a track, and when you close it and open it, especially in the dead quiet at like 3, 4 in the morning, you can hear it. I mean, you can hear it all over the place. It's not quiet. You hear it rattling and banging open and shut. And he realizes he hadn't heard that door open or shut. So he starts walking around the boat with the flashlight and the watch clock. And we had these big sticks. They were called, we technically called them ash stirrers. They were essentially big mahogany sticks that we could beat the shit out of somebody with if they came at us on a night watch. He starts walking around with the ash stirrer up and the flashlight because all the power's cut to the main deck. Like all the circuits are turned off, and they're all back in the engine room at the very stern of the boat. He doesn't see anything. He's testing all the crew cabins and storage lockers as he's going by, and they're all locked. All the windows are closed and locked. The fantail doors are pulled tight and locked. There is no way for somebody to get on there. And this wharf, the boat only lays up against one side of the wharf. The other side's open to this mile-wide river. And there's no one there. So he goes out. He sets the alarm again. He goes over to the wharf boat, which the steamboat was tied up to, and he calls the local police. And the local police come down and they do a walkthrough, and they don't see anything. And, it's easy to get really freaked out. So he wrote it down in the watch log. And the next morning, as the story goes, and this was somebody I knew. I worked with him. I trusted him. He wasn't the type to make things up. The next morning, one of the captains came in. And the captain read the watch report and asked him to come up to the office and pulled out this grouping of photos. We had kind of a little archives area upstairs. And pointed to one man and said, "You recognize him?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's the gentleman who was on the boat last night that he used to work here." And they said, "Yes, that's Captain Winters, who had been dead since about 1945 or 1946. And at that point, the page in the watch log discussing the incident was removed from the watch log at that time, and it's changed a little since then. At that time, the official policy of our boat was it was not haunted. We are a family attraction. Did I ever have any personal experiences with that? I did, actually. I would go up to the pilot's house, and it just felt nasty. They're just real nasty, and that doesn't mean anything to you, but to somebody like me who worked on these boats, it does, because the pilot's house was the pilot's domain. Everybody thinks the captain of the boat is the one who runs the boat. The captain is not. The captain is called the master of the vessel, and you have to be licensed by the Coast Guard now to be the captain of a vessel. And if it's a steamboat, you have to be the captain with a steam endorsement. But the person who actually steers the boat is called the pilot. And the pilot is kind of an expert on certain lengths of waterways, or even maybe an entire river, that's trained to know how to navigate it. And they're the only ones who can really steer the boat. It has to be the pilot or somebody under the pilot's direct supervision. And nobody's allowed in the pilot house without the pilot's say-so. Even though the deck crew, which I was a member of, had to keep a watch in the pilot's house, the pilot could order me out of the pilot house to stand on the deck and stare in to see him, rather than sit in there if he wanted me to be outside the pilot house. So nobody got to go in to the pilot's house without his permission. And at 2, 3 in the morning, between those hours, being in that pilot's house just felt evil. just bad. Like something did not want you in there at all, but you had to go all the way in because the key you had to turn was directly behind the pilot's wheel, where nobody but the pilot needs to be standing. And the weirdest part of this is, if you went in there at 1:59, it didn't feel like that. And if you went in at 4:01, it didn't feel like that. But between 2 and 4, it always felt like that. One time I was going down the stairs, and I swear something tried to push me down. Now, there's other stories about that boat, one of which is Floyd. You may remember Floyd. Floyd is the gentleman that Captain Winters sent out. And Floyd was rather upset about the Captain Winters ordering them to move. You may say he lost his head over it. One morning, one morning, it was about 4:35 in the morning. We were there early. We had about a 6 a.m., 7 a.m. crew, and it was me and one other crew member there. We were getting ready, and every morning you had to go down and check the holds. You took off these giant manhole covers, and you climbed down into the hull of the boat, which was only about 5 feet tall. You had to bend over. And you were checking for leaks is what you were, and you would have to walk all the way back. And one morning, the deckhand who went down there was down on the bottom, and she's in the holds, and she's checking everything. And I'm upstairs on the boiler deck, checking, just doing our standard walk-around fire check. And as I'm doing that, here she comes right up the stern steps. And she goes, "Did you call me?" And I said, "No, I didn't call you." And she goes, "Yes, you did." I said, "No, I didn't call you." She said, I very clearly heard you. You were all the way down in a hold checking it, or I was all the way down in a hold checking it, and I very clearly heard someone yell my name. We were the only people there, and nobody had yelled her name. So that's the first story of the evening. That's how the Belle worked. Years later, I was actually really surprised when I found out that they let the show Ghost Hunters on the boat, because when I worked there, you couldn't talk about those things. You weren't allowed to. You weren't allowed to say things about this. You weren't allowed, except talking amongst yourselves, to do it. And for the people, by the way, who may say, "Oh, somebody told you about this, that's why you always felt upset," nobody told me about this. As a matter of fact, we had a rule: you don't tell the new guys who are doing their third shift watches, because when you got hired on, you were doing third watch until we hired on someone new to do it. You don't tell the new guys about any of this, because if you did and they quit, you didn't have somebody do the watch. But it never took very long for someone to ask about it. Arthur Mogg is asking when I worked there. I worked there in the early 2000s. I stopped working on the Belle in 2004 or 2005. So yeah, that's the Belle. Now, it's not the only river ghost story. There's a lot of river ghost stories out there. One of the whistles you heard in the whole opening is the Delta Queen. The Delta Queen was actually built in California in the 20s, and she was brought through the Panama Canal to the eastern U.S. when she was bought by the Green family. The Green family was this family of steamboat pilots and steamboat owners out of Cincinnati, Ohio. It was called the Green Line Steamboat Company. And it was owned by Mother Green, Ma Green. Ma Green was one of, if not the first, female steamboat masters and pilots on the Western rivers. And all of her children ran boats, and she ran boats. And when they brought the Delta Queen in, it was an overnight steamboat that went up and down the rivers. And it's really just beautiful, a beautiful boat. You can still see it. It's still out there. It was this beautiful boat. And Ma Green, though, much like Captain Winters, died on her boat. And the the Delta Queen ran up until only a few years back, honestly, because of a special exemption it had from Congress. It was an all-wood boat with a steel hull. And there is a law in the United States after a horrible, horrible fire that any overnight passenger vessel cannot be all wood. The Delta Queen would get a special exemption, and Congress would always vote to renew this exception. And a few years back, they stopped voting to renew it. It just kind of fell out of a bill. And the boat ended up being like a moored hotel in Memphis, and I think they're now talking about, if they haven't already, put that exemption back in, and she may be starting operations again. But people who would stay on the Delta Queen would report seeing Ma Green wandering the boat and critiquing things that had changed because that was her boat. And it really it brings it into focus, because if you've worked on the river, the simple fact is I am over a decade removed from working on the river now. But it never really leaves you. I don't know if you can tell from me talking about this, but I loved working on boats. It was hard work, though, and it didn't pay well. And you had to love doing it to keep doing it. But there's a lot of people who worked on these boats. One of them was John Hartford. John Hartford was a songwriter. You may have heard a song he wrote. It's called Gentle on My Mind. He was a river pilot, actually. He was a captain of a steamboat. He wrote a song called Old Time Riverman. And it's all about how old-time rivermen don't die. They just continue to live on the river in their boats. I don't think I've had enough to drink to sing it yet. But if you give me a minute, I'll certainly try. Another wonderful river story out there is Mark Twain, believe it or not. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, yada yada. If you ever want to piss people off, whenever they say Mark Twain, say his real name was Samuel Clemens. That's like the douchebag fact that everybody goes to when they want to sound smart, and I don't know why. But Samuel Clemens was a river pilot. Samuel Clemens was actually a river pilot on a steamboat called the SS Pennsylvania. He got in a fight with the captain of the Pennsylvania, and he quit early. He left. And as he was taking passage back up the river from the SS Pennsylvania, he heard that the SS Pennsylvania had a boiler explosion. The pressure gauges on those boats back then, they weren't perfect. They weren't anywhere near perfect. And if you let the pressure build too high in the boilers, they'd explode. And when they exploded, it would be just this scalding hot steam coming out. I mean, it would cook people alive in the first seconds. And the boilers would blow through the decks, and they'd break up, they'd sink, people would be burned, they'd be dying. It was an agonizing death, because very rarely was anybody killed instantly in these explosions. They almost all ended up dying of third-degree burns or drowning. It was just a horrific thing. And Samuel Clemens heard about that. And remember, he had just gotten off. If he hadn't had that fight with the captain, he would have been on there. We never would have had Huckleberry Finn. We never would have had the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We never would have had a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And somebody in the room right now, woo, lucky for him. It is lucky and it's not lucky. Because right before Samuel Clemens left that boat, before he had the fight with the captain, he got a job on the SS Pennsylvania for his little brother. And his little brother survived the explosion, but only long enough to die of his burns in a hospital in Memphis. And that changed Samuel Clemens. That was probably the moment that he decided he wasn't going to work on the river anymore. But he still did later on write a beautiful book. Every steamboatman has a copy somewhere. It's called On the Mississippi. Life on the Mississippi. It's a wonderful book, and you should certainly, if you have a chance, go get it. Somebody has told me I have a wonderful singing voice and I should sing Old Time Riverman. Let me take a shot. You have to remember, it's been a long time for me since I've sang a lot of these old river songs. So if I freeze up in the middle of it or stop singing, it really is because I have forgotten the words. Although back when I worked on the boats, it wasn't that big of an issue. We used to have what we called union meetings, and we weren't a union boat, but we called them union meetings. And it was when the deck crew, after the officer had left, the first mate would conveniently leave a case of beer and a few bottles of whiskey out on the wharf for us. And we would all go and sit down and have a union meeting, which was really just us sitting there and bullshitting and talking and getting drunk on the wharf in front of our boat. But invariably somebody would pull out a banjo or a guitar or a mandolin or a violin, and we would sing these old river songs together. This one is not an old river song. This one was written by John Hartford. It's called Old Time Riverman. Let me take my drink and we'll see if I can remember it. Wow. How does it start? Where does an old-time riverman go after he's gone away? Does his soul still keep a watch on the deep for the rest of the river day? Does he then come back as a channel cat, or was there lights on the wheel, or a bird that flies through the summer sky, or fish swimming under the keel? Where does an old-time pilot go after he stood his last watch? Does he fall by the ear of the man who steers, saying, hold her on that notch? There's a gentle sneeze on the river breeze, saying, son, I'm going to bed. Then he lights his pipe and goes off in the night. Or was that fireflies instead? Where does an old-time engineer go after he's cooled her down? Gone up the hill to never come back from the quiet side of town. Does a soul live on in the engine's song while the striker checks the gears? Is he still afloat on an old steamboat after he's gone from here? And that's Old Time Riverman. And we used to sing that. As a matter of fact, we had an engineer who passed on very shortly before I started working on the boat. And he was a retired engineer. He had retired years before, but you never really retire. If you spend your entire career on the boat, you always go back to the boat. If retired or not, you're always picking up cruises. You're always coming down, and if you're a captain, taking it for a run as a relief captain or a pilot or as a relief mate and things like that. And he passed on the year that I started working. He had passed on. And we had that year a kind of get-together at one of the mates' houses, and we sang that for him. And I'll never forget that. The mate was named Bill Ray. Mate Bill Ray. Later Captain Bill Ray. And he would play the banjo. He would play the fiddle, the mandolin, the guitar, and we would all sing with him. There's actually, there's a lot of songs about the river I could tell you about. There's one called Shawnee Town. This is an old flatboat song, actually. I'll sing one more since I've got my liquid courage up at the moment. there's one called Shawneetown, and Shawneetown was based on flatboats. Flatboats were kind of the predecessor to steamboats. Before you had steamboats, before you had a way to go upstream and downstream in the same vessel, you had flatboats. And what flatboats were they were exactly what they sound like. They were these flat bottom big boats. You'd put a bunch of stuff on them. They go down the river with the current. You would have somebody with one oar in the back. They call it the beach oar. And it would steer the boat, and it would go downriver all the way from Pittsburgh to New Orleans moving stuff. But when they got there, they couldn't go back upstream. None of the boats had the ability to go upstream. They had no propulsion. So what they did have was feet. They would break down these boats in New Orleans or wherever they ended up, and then the crew would do what's called bushwhacking on the way back, where they would you would walk from New Orleans all the way back up to Pittsburgh to get on the next boat down. You would bushwhack. You would go through the bush to get back to where you needed to be to catch the next boat. This song right here, it's called Shawneetown, and this is a really, really old flatboat song. It's no, excuse me, nowhere near as new as Old Time River Man. But let's see. Some rose up, but we float down, way down the Ohio to Shawneetown. It's hard on the beach, or she moves too slow, way down to Shawneetown on the Ohio. Well, the whiskey's in the jug, boys, and the wheat is in the sack. Gonna float her down to Shawneetown and bushwhack her back. And it's hard on the beach, or she moves too slow, way down to Shawneetown on the Ohio. Well, I got me a wife in Louisville and a gal in New Orleans. When I get to Shawneetown, gonna see my Indian queen. And it's hard on the beach, or she moves too slow, way down to Shawneetown on the Ohio. The water's mighty warm, boys, the air's cold and dank, and the cursed fog gets so damn thick you cannot see the bank. It's hard on the beach, or she moves too slow, way down to Shawneetown on the Ohio. Well, now the current's got her, and we're picking up the slack. Float her down to Shawneetown and bushwhack her back. It's hard on the beach, or she moves too slow, way down to Shawneetown on the Ohio. That's an old one. That's like really old. That's not even remotely new. Is it just me, or is it getting darker behind me every time I do something here now? But that is not like even remotely a new song. That's a really, really old one. So those are the majority of the river stories. I mean, like, there's more that I can sing. I'm just not really sure. Oh, there we go. Okay, I've adjusted the brightness so it actually looks like you can sing me now. Yeah, a lot of the river songs are going to be crap like Shenandoah. They're going to be crap like Long Hot Summer Day. Those are the river songs. When it comes to river stories, I've told a couple of ghost stories and kind of creepy ones. I could tell you a really, really fun one, though. We were not like really advanced people on that boat. You have to understand that, first of all. We weren't politically correct. We weren't forward thinking. We weren't polite. I mean, I don't think, with the exception of like 2 crew members, none of us had above like a high school education. But we had one girl on there, and we all had nicknames. You're not hearing mine. We all had nicknames, and we called each other those nicknames. There was Mama, who was our only female deckhand. There was Shaq, who was a female first mate. There was Spanky. Spanky was a big fat guy, worked on a bunch of steamboats and towboats. There was Papa Bear. Papa Bear was a guy named Ben who had been there since God said, "Let there be light." There was Showboat. Showboat used to be this strong guy who would run out and give a bunch of showing off. He'd pull up these huge bags of ice, these 50, 60-pound bags. He'd do like 3 on each shoulder. There was Beef. We had a guy named Beef. Funny story about Beef. I had a cookout one year when we were there, and I had a bunch of hamburger patties on the grill. And Beef walks over, looks at the grill, and goes, "My children, listen to me." And it killed us then. But yeah, a bunch of those. But anyways, Mama was about our age. She wasn't like old. She was like our age. And she was a shapely young woman, is the best way to put it. She was very attractive. And I'll never forget, we're sitting there one night, and she's talking about something. It's something about men don't find her attractive, something along those lines. And Beef, very, very calmly, very quietly, looks at her and goes, "Mama, you got badonkadonk." And that has stayed with me for over 10 years. "Mama, you got badonkadonk." We had a guy named Shipwreck. Ship was fun. Ship was an ex-Navy man, an ex-submariner, and he was a helmsman on a submarine, a nuclear submarine. And you should all feel very happy about this, because the reason Ship was no longer in the Navy was Ship almost ran a nuclear submarine aground off the coast of Italy when he was drunk. Ship actually smoked like a pack and a half a day of cigarettes, which was really amazing because he never bought any. He was this little weaselly looking guy, and he'd walk over to you and he'd see a light and a cigarette, and he'd go, you got another one of them smokes?" And you'd always give him one. And he smoked like a pack and a half a day. For his birthday one year, I went out and bought the motherfucker a carton of Campbell so he'd stop stealing my cigarettes. I still talk to a lot of these guys. I really do. They're all really, really good people. But yeah, we had one guy named Nub. Nub, if you've never been in a sailing environment, a nub is a non-useful body, N-U-B, nub. And it's what you called all the new guys. All the new guys were nubs until they learned what to do. There was one guy who was there for an entire year, though, and he was still a nub. At one point, we ended up making him the cook, and the boat was doing an out-of-town run, and we were going to be gone for about 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks' worth of food in the galley, and he was the cook for this. And to give you an idea of how Nub was, we always said he was sure-footed, which meant if there was like an open can of paint sitting around, he was sure to put his foot in it. But he said the first morning out, he looks at us and he goes, "I'm going to make you guys some French toast." And we're happy it's French toast. So we go in for breakfast. And, we're sleeping 4 to a bunk, and we're hot bunking it. And this whole thing for 2 weeks, we're miserable. Very first morning out, we walk into the engine room where the tables are set up. We're sitting down. We're getting ready to eat. And he brings out the French toast, and Spanky looks at him and goes, "I'll just have some scrambled eggs." And Nub looks here with this just bewildered look on his face and goes, "Oh, I can't give you scrambled eggs." And we go, "Well, why?" And he goes, "Well, I use them all to make the French toast." At the end of the table is the captain. The captain looks at him and goes, "Cookie, that was 2 weeks worth of eggs. Did you use them all on the first day?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, Cap, but is the French toast good?" And Cap just stands up, walks off. We pull into the next town, and we bring on eggs and a new cook because he got sent the fuck home. The new cook was a vegan. And it is lunch, her first day. And the crew is obviously eating in shifts. We can't go all eat at once. We go down for lunch. We're sitting at the table, and she comes out and she goes, vegetable soup. And we look at it, and we go, there's no ham in this vegetable soup. This is the South. Ham's and fucking everything down there, guys. Like green beans, you're getting fucking ham with your green beans. That's just how it works. You might as well deal with it. She goes, vegetable soup, and there's no ham in it. And we go, where's the meat? She goes, there is no meat. I mean, what do you mean there's no meat? Well, I thought you would want a healthy lunch. I can fix you a sandwich. And we just kind of nod, walk off, go up to the captain and go, Cap, she ain't serving meat. Well, she's gone. The next time we pull it down, we bring on our third cook. Our third cook was a fat Cajun guy who I'm pretty sure was ashing his cigar directly into the food. We didn't care. There was meat and a lot of it, so it was great. Everybody keeps asking me to tell you my nickname. I'm not going to tell you what my nickname is. It wasn't anything interesting. It was not anything interesting, okay? It was literally my dog's, my pet dog's name. It was a name that a bunch of my friends called me, and it just kind of went over. They didn't pick a new name for me. They just started using that one. But yeah, that's those are the boat stories. I mean, there's a lot of them, guys. I was there for years. We've got stories about that boat that go back forever. We had the Boo Cruise. The Boo Cruise was every year. There was a there was a gay group in town. And they would rent out the boat around Halloween for a giant costume party. And we loved it. We loved it. These guys tipped really well. They would get shit-faced and they would tip really well. The boat was a god-awful mess afterwards. But we never minded because they were tipping everywhere. It was like having furries, but not furries on the boat. And we would fight to work the Boo Cruise. That's what it was called. It was called the Boo Cruise. And we're on it one year. And I'm on Texas deck. There were several decks of the boat. There was the main deck, and that's the deck with the engine room and the boilers. Right up the stairs was the boiler deck. The boiler deck was a big dance floor, 2 bathrooms in the back, bar and concession area in the front. Then above that was the hurricane deck. The hurricane deck was an uncovered deck that went around the perimeter of the boat. And then right above that, just kind of barely above that, maybe half a deck up, was the Texas deck. And the Texas deck had a covering on it, and then above that was the roof with the pilot house, the pilot deck. And there were cabins in the middle of the Texas deck as well. But we're up there, and there's just all these gay men in these beautiful costumes, and they're having such a great time. It's packed. It's sweltering in October, and it's packed, and they're having such a good time. When you go outside, it's cold. And I'm wearing my sweater. I'm up on deck watch. During the cruise, we had to have 2 men on the bow, 1 man on the dance floor, 1 man on the Texas and Hurricane deck, and 1 man on pilot watch. I'm on Texas Hurricane watch, and there's just all these people outside, and there's this one guy who's just in fairy wings and nothing else, like fairy wings, very short shorts, freezing his ass off. Showboat, who was this burly conservative gentleman, he's actually now a fire captain, was on pilot watch, and the pilot said, hey, why don't you go down and grab us some coffee? So Showboat takes off down. He gets 2 cups of coffee. He's coming back up, and you had to buzz your way into the pilot house. And you gave a little buzzer, and the pilot would press a button, and it would unlock the door, and you could go up the narrow staircase. But he's standing there, and this young man, the ferryman, we'll just call him the ferryman now, which isn't a derogatory term. He was dressed like a fairy. He had fucking fairy wings and bare-chested, no pants, tiny little short shorts covered in glitter. He was a fairy. That was his costume. He is the ferryman. I'm not being offensive. But he's standing there. He's got these 2 cups of coffee. He's riding in. He's holding 2 cups of coffee. He's waiting for the pilot. And I'm standing there, and I'm just watching, making sure nobody's doing anything strange. And the ferryman walks up to Showboat and says, hey, buddy, how about you give me a sip of that coffee? And Showboat looks at him and goes, no, sir, no. Oh, come on. I'll suck your dick. And Showboat goes, sir, this is the captain's coffee, and I'm straight, so you can't have any of it. And the kid looks at him and goes, Well, you shouldn't have told me that. Because now I'll suck your dick twice, swallow, and tell you what it tastes like for a drink of that coffee. And Showboat admirably says, no, sir, this is the captain's coffee. You can get some at the concession stand. And goes up. Now, the watches change not too long after that, and I go up to the pilot house, and we're both standing out back. We're smoking a cigarette outside the pilot house, and he goes, did you see that guy? I said, yeah, man, I was standing right there. I overheard the whole thing. He goes, what do you think about that? I looked at him, I said, well, Showboat, I'll tell you, we get the coffee for free. Oh, the Boo Cruise was fun. Every year at the Boo Cruise, we had to put somebody in a wheelchair and take them down the wheelchair elevator in the back of the boat because they were too wasted to do anything. And it was normally like the biggest drag queen that had shown up at the thing. It was hilarious. It was a wonderful time, though. It really was. And they were clean. The boat was a mess, but the boat was a mess after every big event. But they were just real, real nice. However, you get a bunch of people of similar interests with a lot of booze on the river, and things happen. I was standing on the deck once during the Boo Cruise, and I'll never forget, one of our crewmen came down. He, like I said, showed very admirable restraint. But he had gone up, and he went into the bathrooms to check the bathrooms. And I'm standing on the bow, and he comes in, he's pale as a ghost. And I look at him and I go, what's going on? He goes, I went in the bathroom and there were these guys. I look at myself, we don't go in the bathroom during the Boo Cruise, man. Just stay safe and light a cigarette. But that was fun. Another one was the Deaf Cruise. Oh man, that Deaf Cruise. That was something else. When we were working on the boats, we had one year a deaf school group come on, and really nice kids, young kids, but really nice kids, and they had a blast, and they're running around, and we learned some sign language, like, stop running, and things like that. What was it? Stop running, thank you, and stuff like that, because they were pretty much completely deaf. But this tells you a lot about the crew we had there. Because as we're standing there and loading on, we're all standing there in our uniforms, the DJ pulls up, and one of the guys looks over and looks at me and goes, why do they have a DJ? And I go, you know what? That's a good question. So we actually pulled one of the teachers aside and asked them that. Not offensively, just, we were just kind of wondering about the DJ. We thought this was a deaf group. And they go, oh, yes, but the kids can hear the vibrations. They can feel the vibrations, and they dance to the vibrations. I went, oh, that's really neat. Like, that's really cool. So we're on the dance floor, and we're watching these kids just having a blast, dancing to the music, and they're feeling the vibrations. And it dawns on one of the guys. He looks over at me, and he goes, the DJ just keeps playing the same 5 songs. That would piss me off. And I looked at him, I said, do you think they notice? But the best part was when the music cut out, because this is an old boat. It's ran by a paddle wheel. The whole boat vibrates. So these kids are out there, they're having a blast, they're dancing, and the music cuts out for some reason, but the boat keeps vibrating. So they keep dancing in silence. And man, we felt horrible, but we couldn't help but laugh a little. But the biggest problem with all this was, you remember how I said we learned sign language to talk to the kids and ask them to stop doing things like running and yanking down life jackets, right? You see, we're always, when stuff like that is going on, we're always really, really kind of busy. And we're not always able to do things as effectively as we want. And we keep walking around and we're, stop running, thank you. Stop running, thank you. And all these kids are just looking at us wide-eyed, just every time we do it. So we go up to the crew member who knew sign language and taught us that. And we said, we're telling these kids to stop running, and we're saying thank you. And they're looking at us like we've just been yelling at them. We don't understand it. And she goes, well, what are you doing? And we go, well, stop running. Thank you. And she goes, oh. And I go, what? And she goes, that's not thank you. She goes, this is thank you. This is fuck you. We didn't mean to. We've been walking around in such a rush that we weren't making sure of this. We were doing this the whole time. So we were walking around to like these little 6 or 7 year old kids. Stop running. Fuck you. Stop running. Fuck you. We're going, oh no. And I just, to this day, I imagine that I really fucked up the cruise for somebody. Like, this kid goes home, his parents are like, how was it? And he's like, they were dicks, and went off to his room and sat down. Like, I just fucked it all up for him. Oh, I need another drink. And guys, those aren't the only river stories I have. They're just the ones that I've actually already, like, told at conventions and stuff, so I'm okay to tell them again now, because I know you probably won't lynch me for them at this point. So, yeah, exactly. Tien Long says, now we all know, and you should. You should. Very important. Thank you, fuck you. Thank you, fuck you. There you go. You're welcome. That's your lesson for the night. We've been in this for about an hour. I want to point out right below the stream, there's a link to the Patreon, the Ko-fi, the fucking Streamlabs donation thing. If you want to toss money at me, toss money at me. If you don't. I'm here for a while, guys. You're literally stuck with me until I'm fucking tired of doing this, or all of you disappear. So, I guess I should tell some more ghost stories. And I'm going to kind of look at the chat. Anybody got any like suggestions on stories they want to hear, anything like that? Because guys, I got a load of ghost stories. I could tell you about the house I'm in right now. I could tell you about the last house I lived in. I could tell you a lot of stuff. And forgive the cigarette. I am smoking. I should not be. It's a nasty habit. If you don't smoke, don't pick it up. Don't be like me, kids. Only mugs do drugs. And don't drink. It's bad for you. Uncle Kage, I will give Patreon patrons access to my river name. Certainly, without an issue. But I've got to wait until they clear it this month, because I'm not going to have what I had last time, where a bunch of people do that. Somebody wants to hear about my haunted house. This is interesting. This house that I'm in is about 200 years old. A little less than that, but not by much. It was built either right before or right after the Civil War. It's one of the oldest houses on my street. As a matter of fact, the house right across the street from me was owned by one of Abraham Lincoln's relatives, like a cousin or something. So anyways, this house was built then. Now, I've got this weird thing. Whenever I move into a house, especially older ones, I like to know the history of them. So one of the things I did was I looked up the history of this house, and I discovered that there was a violent death in this house upstairs in the room that's actually right above my head right now. It was a murder. It was an unsolved murder. A man was stabbed to death while sleeping in that room. This was back in like the 30s. The only weird thing that happens in this house, though, is our attic door has like a latch on it, one of those hook and eye latches. And it'll be latched, and I'll be the only one home. And I'll know I've latched the damn thing. And I'll walk by, and it'll be undone. And I'll go around the house going, who went up into the attic last time? And nobody did that. Like, nobody meant to. Yes, Arthur has pointed out I don't like to smoke in my house, but I do it on the streams. I actually have both of the windows in here open, and you can't hear them, but I have fans yanking air out of this room as we're talking. Specifically because I don't like to smoke on streams. But I also don't like to pause the stream to go outside for a cigarette, and I'm an addict. And being an addict is a bad thing, boys and girls. What else? What other ones? We lived in an apartment once that was an old mansion. This old mansion had belonged to a priest, a reverend. And you got to understand that area of town that we were living in. at that point was mostly of old Victorian. Look up old Louisville sometime. It's a Victorian area, like one of the largest Victorian areas in the nation. And it's all these old mansions. But then when the city started going downhill, a lot of these old mansions got turned into apartments. We lived in one on the second floor, and we would at night from our bedroom see this black form move from the bathroom out the door every night. And that's when we found out that that a gentleman died in our bathroom. But it's stuff like that, and it's I wouldn't say that I believe in the supernatural. I do like to think that there's something after death, and personally, I really like the idea that after death I get to come back and fuck with people. Because all of you assholes are going down if I get to come back and fuck with people. But one thing I really do enjoy, I like ghost stuff. I like that freaky stuff. And not like that, you fucking assholes. I like all that strange stuff. One of the things I love to do is we are not that far from Gettysburg. We're maybe an hour and a half from Gettysburg. I like to drive out to Gettysburg. And QM and I like to go out there. We like to do the ghost tours. One thing we love to do is something called the Vacant Chair Dinner. It's held in a house that was in Gettysburg and was actually a Confederate sniper's nest during the Battle of Gettysburg. And the attic, and it's supposed to be really haunted. Now, we've never stayed there. It's a bed and breakfast. We've never stayed there. But we go on their ghost tours. We like to go hear the ghost stories. And they have a restaurant in the house that does the Vacant Chair Dinner Theater. And all the Vacant Chair Dinner Theaters is while you're eating, they tell you about funeral customs and burial customs and traditions during the Civil War and the time surrounding it and superstitions. And there's a gentleman who walks around the room and he sings these old Civil War death ballads while he's doing it. It's just really, it's creepy and it's nice. And ooh. Uncle Kage has asked if there are echoes of the General Slocum. The General Slocum, Kage, if we're thinking of the same boat, would be the one that burned the fuck to the ground. Correct? Yeah, I'm watching the chat. But if we're talking about the same one, the General Slocum burned the fuck to the ground and killed a bunch of people back in 1904. It was in New York. The Sultana. The Sultana is a Civil War vessel, if I'm correct. It was a steamer during the Civil War. It was bringing troops home. And I'm checking right now on Wikipedia to see if I'm correct. But it was bringing troops home in 1865 when it exploded. It was the worst maritime disaster in the United States at the time that it happened. She only had like capacity for, I want to say, 400 or 500 people. But she was carrying like 2,000 people at the time. You have found remnants of it, and there are people who have claimed they have seen the ghost of the Slocum. The steamer United States, I want to say, actually collided with another steam vessel outside of Cairo, Illinois, though. And that one there are echoes of. Pilots on the river often report hearing a steamboat whistle around the point where the boats collided and sank. So, yeah. There are some echoes of ghost ships on the river. Not as many as you would think, really. The river's kind of strange in that way. Now, you have ghost ships all the time, but most of the river hauntings aren't going to be like you see it burning. But you do hear screams. The Sultana disaster that Kage mentioned, you do hear screams. Like, it's supposed to be at night. If you're in certain places, you hear screams out on the water from the people who died. They very recently, I think, found the remnants of the Sultana, though, and started bringing pieces up for archaeological study. It's real interesting. But speaking of the Sultana and talking about everything else there, the Confederate submarine, that'd be the Hubley. You can find the Hubley, actually. They raised it. It's in a preservation tank out there. It's beautiful. If you've ever been able to see it, or if you ever get the chance to go see it. It's really, really interesting. It went out and it sunk one U.S. vessel, but was probably damaged by the explosion. Because they would go out, and what they literally do is they attach a harpoon with explosives on the end to blow up the whole of the ship. but they would go out and do that, and the first explosion probably damaged the sub, and it sank with everybody aboard. So when they recovered it, they of course recovered the bodies of everybody who was on it, and it's still there. I was talking a moment ago about the vacant chair dinner theater, and I was talking about that so I could annoy you with another song. Because you feed my ego and tell me I can sing. You shouldn't do shit like that. If you stroke my ego, guys, I'll just sit here and let you pet me all night. I'm much like a fox in that way. But it is a funeral song. It's a mourning song called The Vacant Chair. Let me take a drink of non-whiskey real quick, and we'll see if I can get this one. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be a vacant chair. We will linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. When 1 year ago we gathered, joy was in his mild blue eye. Now the golden cord is severed, and our hopes in ruin lie. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. At our fireside, sad and lonely, often will the bosom swell at remembrance of the story, how our noble Willie fell, how he strove to bear the banner through the thickest of the fight, and uphold our country's honor and the strength of manhood's might. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. True, they tell us wreaths of glory evermore will deck his brow, but this soothes the anguish only, sweeping o'er our heartstrings now. Sleep today, O early fallen, in thy green and narrow bed. Dirges from the pine and cypress mingle with the tears we shed. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him as we breathe our evening prayer. That's The Vacant Chair, and that was written by George Root. It was a Civil War era mourning song. Fun fact about deaths in that era. One thing they used to do was they made hair wreaths. If you don't know what a hair wreath is, it was literally hair from the heads of the women in the house, and they would weave them into these mourning wreaths that they would then hang on the doors and windows. They would also put money along the put money. They would also put coverings all over the mirrors in the house, really because they thought it was a way to trap the souls. Kage's asking me to sing All Quiet Along the Potomac. I know the words, but not the melody of that one. So I can't sing that. I can, however, see if I can remember Just Before the Battle, Mother. Let's see. Oh, man. What else do I know? I know, I got one for you. Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears, while we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. While we seek mirth and beauty in music light and gay, there are frail forms fainting at the door. Though their voices are silent, their pleading looks will say, oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around our cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. There's a pale, drooping maiden who toils her life away, with a worn heart whose better days are o'er. Though her voice would be merry, 'tis sighing all the day. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a sigh that is wafted across the troubled wave. 'Tis a wail that is heard upon the shore. 'Tis a dirge that is murmured around the lowly grave. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Kage has brought up the Dulcimer. I do have the Dulcimer here. I tuned it. I cannot sing and play the Dulcimer at the same time. However, I'm just not that multi-talented. But if he really wants to hear the Dulcimer, I can see if I can pick it up on the mic. Hold on. Let me know if you can or cannot hear this. And I'll just watch the chat. Because there's no point in me playing if you can't hear that. Yeah, the Mountain Dulcimer, and give me 1 second, I want to check the tuning on this, because it sounded just a little off to me. The Mountain Dulcimer. It's a horrible, horrible instrument. You should never play it. Okay. Let's see if I can remember this one. Oh, yes, that was Boil That Cabbage Down. The last one, which I played rather horribly, was Abide With Me. Let's see. Abide with me, soft falls eventide. Lord with me, abide. Shadows fall, and sweet pleasures flee. Help of the helpless, so abide with me. But yeah, those are the easy ones, and I've had like 6 shots, so I'm not going to play any of the hard ones right now. The really cool thing about the Dulcimer, though, is it's there's one melody string. The way I play it as a drone instrument. So there's like one melody string at the very front. So with a little bit of work, you can learn just about fucking everything else. And yeah, everybody, he didn't even need an extra shot. I'm gonna take one now, though. Abide With Me is actually one I know for a special reason. My cousin Josh died a number of years ago now. He was a spoiled shit. Nobody liked him that much. Josh, though, died of a heroin overdose. And he wasn't good for much, but he was blood, and he took very good care of my homebound grandmother, and losing him is probably what ended up killing her. But Abide With Me was one of the songs that was played at his funeral, and he wasn't a religious person at all. But it's one that we remember simply because of that. It's Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. And it's, you have to give me a second. It's a very beautiful song, and I'll never forget it being sang at his funeral. And my aunt, who was my dad's youngest daughter, and that was her only son, and really, for the time he was alive, that was her life. Singing it, and so yeah, that's when I can play and sing at the same time. Because I know that one really well. I am still working on my old Kentucky home, which I sing wonderfully. I don't sing much well, but I do sing my old Kentucky home wonderfully. And I'm still learning how to get that one on the Dulcimer consistently without having to start over like 5 times. I remember when I was learning piano, and I would fuck up learning piano, and that's a musical term. That's a professional musical term right there. Fuck up learning piano. I would fuck up playing the piano, and you'd want to start over. Like, that's what you always want to do. You want to start whatever you were playing over. And the music teacher would reach over, and she was just this tiny, kind of mean woman. She'd lean over, and she'd You play through the mistakes. And she was like tiny, but she had a voice like fucking Harvey Firestein. And she would slap you. I mean, she would hit you. This was like fucking back when other adults could hit you. You know, play through the mistakes. So I've always learned that, and the problem with that is I tend to stop in the middle of playing things, and my mind goes, play through the mistakes, and the other part of me goes, start the fuck over, man, and learn the song as one piece. So, that's why I don't have a lot of playing on that until I'm sure I have a song completely down. Plus, I mean, guys, I come from a southern family, and my family is like from the coal mining regions of Kentucky originally. I was raised in the city. My father's family, my mother's family were dirt poor, and they were from the country and from coal areas and tobacco areas. And in those areas, you know, you didn't have a lot of instruments. You learned to sing. The dulcimer is a huge instrument where my parents' family's from because of Sears Roebuck. Sears Roebuck sold those in their catalogs for really cheap. So people, young ladies, could learn to play them in the parlor. So that's like how dulcimers became a big thing, and every home in the South for a really long period of time had one because of that. And that's kind of the neat thing about that. Yeah. Let's see. What else? If you stop, people know you fucked up. If you keep going, people think you're creative and abstract. I'm doing the jazz version of Abide With Me. But yeah. Now, of course, that did come back later. If you've never like taken music lessons, I encourage you to please go do so. I mean, I'm by no means wonderful at the piano. Like, I can play like 6 or 7 songs well. But because of that, I can read music, and I'm fairly good at picking up stuff like the dulcimer and the ukulele and things like that, simply because I know what it sounds like, and it's really helpful. Just even if you just dick around and you never sound good at doing it, it's really awesome to do that. So, oh my God, Uncle Kage, you son of a bitch. Uncle Kage is talking about a John Prine song named Paradise. It is a song talking about Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. Muhlenberg County is a county in western Kentucky. It's where there was coal. There were 2 types of coal. There was the anthracite coal, which was over in the Eastern Mountain Range, and that's the same type they have here in Pennsylvania. And there was, I think they called it Bitmus coal. That was a much softer coal. Didn't burn as well. Didn't give as much heat or as much power when it burned. So it wasn't really good for like steam, but it was great for heating your home and shit. Well, the Peabody Coal Company pretty much owned all of Muhlenberg County, and this song's somewhat biographical and accurate in that it was at one point so bad that when they were blasting for coal in Muhlenberg County, it would shake and break windows in the towns. And they had this huge steam shovel there, this giant coal shovel that would just scoop it right out of the ground. And I've seen that shovel. They used to close down the highway when they were moving the shovel across, and I had family in Bowling Green as a kid, so we would go down there and we would like run into the sections of road where they had closed off this giant section of road, and there would come this just fucking gigantic shovel. At the time, it was like the world's biggest one. But John Prine, I think, wrote a song about it called Paradise. And it's all about coal mining in western Kentucky. You have a lot of coal mining songs in like the Appalachians. You have a lot in these Bitmus fields. So it is, what is it? When I was a child, my family would travel down to western Kentucky where my parents were born. There's a backwards old town that's often remembered so many times that my memories were worn. And Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County and down by the Green River where paradise lay? Well, I'm sorry, my son, but you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train done hauled it away. Well, sometimes we'd travel right down the Green River to the abandoned old prison down by Hadra Hill, where the air smelled like snakes. We'd shoot with our pistols, but empty pop bottles are all we would kill. And Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where paradise lay? Well, I'm sorry, my son, but you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train done hauled it away. Then the coal company came with the world's largest shovel. Then they tortured the timber and stripped all the land. Well, they dug for their coal till the land was forsaken, then chalked it all up to the progress of man. Now, Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where paradise lay? Well, I'm sorry, my son, but you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train done hauled it away. When I die, let my ashes float down the Green River. Let my soul roll on up on the Rochester Dam. I'll be halfway to heaven with paradise waiting, just 5 miles away from wherever I am. And Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where paradise lay? Well, I'm sorry, my son, but you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train done hauled it away. And that's that's really kind of one of those songs that sets out what happened there, because the Peabody Coal Company just fucking owned that area of it. It's not an exaggeration to say that. And these are all like real songs. One of my favorites that I hate to call my favorites, because it's actually a really, really sad song, is it's a coal song called Black Lung. And it was written by Hazel Dickens. Hazel Dickens, she was the wife of, daughter of, and sister of coal miners in eastern Kentucky. Wonderful folk singer. She wrote a lot of good songs. You may actually have heard like that Billy Bragg song, Which Side Are You On? That's actually her song. She wrote that during a miners' strike in Harlan County, Kentucky. Come all you good workers, good news to you I'll tell, of how the good old Union is coming here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? That's her. She also wrote one called Black Lung. And the story behind Black Lung is much different. Black Lung tells the story of a miner who has contracted and is dying of black lung. And if you've never seen somebody die of black lung, you've never heard of anybody die, it's a horrible death. I mean, it's just a terrible, terrible way to die. It's almost like you're drowning. You can't breathe at all, but you're there still. And it was a huge problem in eastern Kentucky. Now, Hazel Dickens had a brother who was a miner. And her brother contracted black lung. And her brother did end up dying of black lung after he was fired from the mines and the company refused to pay for his medical treatment, and after he ended up in the poorhouse. And black lung is just, it's, if you ever, I'm going to sing it here in a second, but I strongly encourage you, look up her singing this on YouTube. It is, especially knowing that story, knowing that she wrote this song and sang this song for her brother who went through the exact thing in these lyrics. This is not a story she made up. It's not an amalgamation. This song is a true story of something that happened to her brother. And knowing that, watch that video of this little old lady singing this song in this just scratchy, reedy mountain voice, and realize she's not singing about a character in a song. She's singing about her little brother. He's had more hard luck than most men could stand. The mines was his first love, but never his friend. He's lived a hard life. I can't sing this one. I can't even get in, but please go look at it. Please go look this one up on YouTube. I can't sing this one. She hits this high note right at the beginning. It kills me whenever she does. Oh shit. That's strong. So what we have next? And I promise you guys ghost stories. I gave you ghost stories. I promise you guys river stories. I gave you river stories. Has anybody, and I'm watching the chat now, has anybody ever been to like Gatlinburg? Or not Gatlinburg, Gettysburg? Other than Kage, who has obviously been to Gettysburg and probably went to Gettysburg like every other fucking year on a school trip. Like, has anybody gone out to Gettysburg and had like a really good time there? I'm just going to watch the chat for a minute and smoke my cigarette. One, because the whiskey is doing its magic to loosen my damn throat up. Mark McGow has joined us. Mark, I am drinking Stranahan's Colorado whiskey tonight that was given to me by a guy at Anthrocon, and it's pretty good. Gettysburg is like really weird. And the reason it's so weird is when you walk around the town, you need to remember most of the buildings there a lot of them were there at the time of the battle. And when you're walking in the town, you're not walking like in this tourist town and, off somewhere is the battle. It's not like going to a lot of Civil War battlefields. The town is the battlefield. Like, there's still bullet holes from the Civil War in buildings in the town. And it's really neat to walk around and realize that. What's less neat is realizing that at any given moment, you're probably standing where someone died. There is an area in Gettysburg. It's called the Grove. It is just off of the national park. Like, literally, there is a walkway. And this side of the walkway is the Gettysburg National Battlefield. And this side of the walkway belongs to the city of Gettysburg. It is a federal offense to be in the park on any of the ground that's owned by the National Park Service after dark. You can get charged with a federal offense for that. So what a lot of these tour groups will do is they take you out and you're like right on the other side of the battlefield. Guys, don't forget, the camera's focusing. It's a new camera. I'm still kind of getting used to the setup and where I need to be and how much I can move and shit like that. So it just focuses when I move. But it's weird to be there. But there's this one area called the Grove, and there was a Southern regiment, a Western Southern regiment, which was really weird for the Battle of Gettysburg. What you don't know is there were two theaters in the war. There was the Eastern Theater, and there was the Western Theater. Now, I say Western, and you guys are thinking like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. Guys, there was really nothing west of like the Mississippi other than territories and maybe California during the Civil War. And it didn't really reach that far. When I say Western, what we are talking about is like everything west of Virginia. Like Alabama, Kentucky. Those were all part of what we called the Western Theater, which was the more minor theater in the war. As a matter of fact, Grant, who was considered like a really inept general at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, was assigned to the Western Theater specifically because they didn't think he could handle being in the Eastern Theater, and he was a huge success in the Western Theater, and that's how he got put in charge of the Army of the Potomac. Anyways, it was really weird for units from the Western Theater to be at the Battle of Gettysburg. And there was a Confederate unit in the Grove that was charging towards one of the hills, and they were pretty much slaughtered. I mean, just pretty much slaughtered. And there was a mass grave over there. They disinterred the bodies years later, but there was a mass grave where they threw all the Confederate bodies. That is not part of the national park. That belongs to the city of Gettysburg, and a lot of ghost tours go out there. And it's really weird because you can take pictures and you see shit. And I have taken pictures where things that look like somebody is in it, but who knows whether there really is or not. There's this whole thing where like your brain automatically tries to form a human shape when it sees a bunch of stuff that it can't really process in. So I don't know whether there was or not, but it's freaky, and it's really freaky at like 1 in the goddamn morning. But Gettysburg itself is just creepy. There's an area called the Devil's Den, and where you see that picture of the guy at Gettysburg, and he's slumped up against the rock and he's dead. That's in Devil's Den. That actually was a staged photograph. They moved that man's body to there for that photo. And now when you're in Devil's Den, which is this huge rocky outcrop in the middle of the battlefield, you don't really want to have a camera. They have a bad habit of breaking when you're there. They have a bad habit of breaking, or the film being spoiled, or things like that when you're there. So you don't really want to have a camera there. And I would joke a lot about that. I took my phone out the last time we were at the battlefield. I took my phone out. I took pictures in Devil's Den. And I kept saying, "Oh, nothing happened." Like the next day, I'm outside in front of my office on a phone call. And I've had this phone for a while. I have never dropped a phone. I have literally never dropped my phone before. I dropped it, and it cracked the screen the day after I took the pictures in Devil's Den. I haven't dropped it since. I hadn't dropped it before. I just dropped it the day after I did that. So, if it keeps me from damaging a phone, I'll keep from taking pictures in Devil's Den. Let's see, what else do we have? What other ghost stories do I know? I know I have a lot of stories, guys. It's just like a question of what do you want to hear more than anything. Yes, Ardrix. I'm watching like Ardrix here, like do nothing. He's like, Boozy. Oh man. So what else do we have? I mean, I've sang for you. I've played the Dulcimer for you. I've told some ghost stories. It's just the puppet knows. The puppet knows a ghost story called "The Ghost of Boozy's Dignity." What else? Alejandro, thank you for coming in, man. I really appreciate it. Go get some sleep. You got an early day tomorrow, and I've still got whiskey to drink, and I'm not bored of you guys yet. So I'll just sit here and keep talking until you guys start falling off, because I don't pay attention to really fucking anything, and I like to hear the sound of my own voice. So, oh man, we've been going almost 2 hours. Holy shit, that's strange. Dance. Ukulele. Now, the ukulele's not here. The ukulele is not in this house. The ukulele is at my in-laws. So, sing some... If you could sing the Gray Funnel line, I shall love you with mouth. Well, Kage, that's the quickest way to convince me not to sing the Gray Funnel line. Like that really is the fastest way to convince me not to sing. So I will love you with my mouth. And I love Tien. I'm going to learn the Gray Funnel line now. Tien, just bring him sake. You're good. I swear. That's all you need to do. Have I had experiences with Ouija boards, seances, Bloody Mary? No. And here's why I have not. It's actually really, really simple. Guys, I don't know if ghosts are real or not. I have no idea. I don't think that there's no scientific evidence that they exist, but there's no scientific evidence they don't exist. And you can naysay and doubt anything, and I'm a skeptic when I see that shit. But if they are real, I'm not gonna fuck with the dead, because I can't hurt them, and they may be able to hurt me. So things like Bloody Mary, Ouija boards, and seances, that falls very strongly under fucking with the dead, in my view. And it's just not something I'm going to do. Oh, hey. Let's see. What do we do know? Kage. Kage, I'm going to go in my kitchen for a second. Do you know about the Molly Maguires? And I'll just talk while I'm waiting for his response. I want to know if he knows about the Molly Maguires. Because, guys, I'm recording this the chat stream over on the side. So if Kage knows about the Molly Maguires, I'm going to put him on point here in a moment. While I walk in the kitchen and grab another soda. Because, guys, it's fun. Kage, would you fill these children in on the Molly Maguires while I walk in my kitchen and grab another soda to chase some of this whiskey down with? Did he do what he was asked to do, or did he ignore us all? You see, I can't tell. I actually have to look into the real chat now. Okay, he did not do what he was asked to do. Uncle Gake. I like that. Uncle Gake. No, Mark. Gake's okay. We can go with Uncle Gake. Well, the Molly Maguires, guys, it was a group of miners back in the 1800s in the northeastern coal regions of Pennsylvania. They were Irish miners. There we go. Strong arms for Irish coal miners. I always felt that they were just trying to advocate for the Irish, but when things got rough, they got blamed for a lot, and that's about right. They actually, most of them were Irish miners. They were borderline criminals, really. But, I mean, they were almost kind of like criminals for a good reason, because what they wanted to do was improve the working conditions and the pay conditions in the mines for all of the miners there. And at the time, like, Pennsylvania's weird in that the Welsh families still won't talk to the Irish families, which still won't talk to the Polish families and things like that. It's really weird, especially when you get up into the northeastern coal regions. With all that, and a lot of it stems back to this. The Welsh were mine bosses, the Irish were miners, the Polish and the Romanians and such were the guys, the Czechs, the Slavic names, were the guys that came in and took the Irish jobs. The Molly Maguires were a group that violently, for the most part, tried to force a change in conditions. They were treated like criminals because they were. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, which if you don't know about the Pinkertons, guys, please, for the love of God, take an American history course. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was brought in to catch them. And they did. A lot of guys were arrested. A lot of them were hung. And at one point in Tamaqua, Tamaqua a town in Pennsylvania, there were bodies of the Molly Maguires who were moving from their execution to their funeral place, sitting in the train station. That train station is like amazingly haunted now. Like you see people walking around, and they always say it looks like one of the Molly Maguires. As a matter of fact, an attorney here in my town that I know, a criminal defense attorney, is a descendant of one of the Molly Maguires, who's, I'm not going to give his full name, but his first name was Robert, and everybody called him Bob. And now, if you call this is how like fresh it is. This is how big it is still in this area. If you call him Bob, he will immediately correct you and say, no, it's Robert, not Bob. And the reason he'll do that is because Bob X is the Molly Maguire, and he doesn't want to be associated with the Molly Maguire. Depending on who you ask, they are either folk heroes or criminals. A lot of people kind of see them as folk heroes. Carbon County Jail is still standing, and it was the jail that they were in, that some of them were in. They were in several counties, but some of them were in the Carbon County Jail, and what they did there was they built a gallows right in the middle of the jail, and they hung 3 of them there. Mickey Doyle, Edward Kelly, and Alex Campbell for allegedly killing mine bosses. Really, this was like the coal companies and the coal barons' way to break up what was kind of a nascent union, was to call them criminals, call them murderers, which some probably were, and then have them convicted and killed. And it was really kind of a kangaroo court, especially for the one named Alex Campbell. Alex Campbell said he was innocent through the whole ordeal. And this was back, now you get convicted and you get sentenced to death, and you may sit in jail 30, 40 years before they pull through your sentence, and you're going to have a lot of appeals and a lot's going on. Back then, it was like you got convicted and you got sentenced to death, and like a month later, you were fucking dead. But in Carbon County, they had several of them up, and they had this gallows built, and Alex Campbell had protested his innocence the whole time. And in his cell, he placed his hand on the wall of the cell, and he places his hand right on the wall, and he says, "May this print stay here as memory that they killed an innocent man." There's a lot of talk about this handprint and whether the people who now own the jail, because the old Carbon County jail was decommissioned years ago, but it's still there. It's like this huge structure. Looks like a castle. There's a lot of talk about the handprint, but to this day, the handprint is still on that wall. If you go in for a tour of the jail, they have a reconstruction of the gallows, and they take you into the cells and show you all that. But that handprint's still there, Alex Campbell's handprint. A more interesting thing is, when I was in law school, I lived in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, which is right next to Carbon County and right next to the county I'm in now. Schuylkill's very interesting as far as county goes. Very poor county. The prison that they have is, there's a modern building inside, but the main part of the prison is still the part that was there when all this was going on. And from the roadway going past Pottsville, you can see this giant brick wall of the old prison, which looks once again like a castle. You see this giant brick wall. And that was called the Gallows Wall. And you got to remember, these roads, like, these are the old roads, like from before cars and shit. They just widened them and paved them, and now they're the roads again. So travelers could go by, and they would see on the hill overlooking Pottsville this giant prison with this wall facing the road in the distance. And there's these little posts that stick out from the wall, from the top of the wall. Schuylkill County didn't have a gallows. Schuylkill County would walk you to the top of the wall, put the noose around your neck, with the other end attached to one of those posts, and they push you off the wall. And they called it the Gallows Wall, and then they let your body dangle there for people to see as they went by on the roads. And several Molly Maguires were executed that way. Now, I said that that they had become, over time, a bit of a folk hero type of thing. And there's a song out there. It's called the Sons of Molly, and it's all about the 3 who were killed in Carbon County, the 3 who were executed in the prison there. It's a fairly new song as far as folk songs go, but it's a beautiful one. And let's see if I can remember that. When the wind blows wild at night, past the breaker melancholy, if you stand in the dark with your ears to the wind, you can hear the Sons of Molly. Deep in the dark of the old mine shaft, you can smell the smoke and the fire, and the whispers low in the mines below are the ghost of Molly Maguire. Well, I'll tell ye, boys, Mickey Doyle is my name, and I come from Carbon County. Now I shot the boss of the Lansford mine, and my soul is up for bounty. But I will die with my head held high, for I fought for the men below. Those men who slave and sweat and die down in the black hell hole. So I'll tell ye, boys, Edward Kelly is my name, and I'm hanging in the morning. For I shot Jack Jones for skinning my bones, how I cursed the sound of morning. And I will die with my head held high, for I fought for the men below. The men who slave and sweat and die down in that black hell hole. So I'll tell ye, boys, Alex Campbell is my name, and no pistol did I fire. But I will fall from the gallows wall just for being a Molly Maguire. But I will die with my head held high, for I fought for the men below. The men who slave and sweat and die down in that black hell hole. But yeah, that's like one of the main stories. Now, where I live, the county I live in, we have an area of it called the Eck. The Eck is interesting, guys. It's right on the border of this county and Schuylkill County. It's right there where the mountains start. And there's one mountain in particular. It's called Hawk Mountain. And Hawk Mountain, at the very, very top of it, it's now a wildlife reserve, but the very, very top of it, there's a caretaker's cabin. It's not a cabin, it's a house. But it used to be the Schambach Inn, the Schambach Tavern and Inn. And back in the days before cars, to get from like there into this county, to get from Schuylkill County to this county, you had to go over Hawk Mountain a lot of times. And at the very top, there'd be this little tavern inn, and people would stop for the night. Right there at the Schambach Inn. It was ran by a man named Matthias Schambach. And Matthias Schambach would have visitors, and a lot of times the visitors wouldn't be heard from very often. But Matthias Schambach seemed to do very well there. And you can guess what happened. People would go missing. Matthias Schambach would show up with gold and money and all this stuff. The weirdest part about this story, though, is Matthias Schambach also sold sausage. But nobody remembers ever seeing any pigs around his building and his farm. Anyways, Matthias Schambach was eventually caught. And there had been like stories about him for a long period of time before he was caught. Like one guy stopped in and found the house empty, and went out to the barn and opened it, and there was blood on the ground. And Matthias Schambach ran towards him. He jumped on his horse and took off. Matthias Schambach was eventually caught, and really the way he got caught was he killed a Jewish peddler. Jewish peddlers used to go around door to door selling goods. It's exactly what it sounds like. And that's not racist. They normally were Jewish. They were called Jewish peddlers. Anyways, a Jewish peddler was coming back from Port Clinton, which was a little town on the Schuylkill River. And he stops in at the Schambach Tavern, and he's not heard from again, but he is expected in the city of Reading, which was a good day's ride at that point. Several days after he is expected, somebody is saying Schambacher, however that is incorrect. His name was Schambach. There's a historical record of this with his gravestone, which is gone now. But his name was Schambach, not Schambacher. Trust me, I have heard this story way too many times by now. But he shows up in Reading and he's selling goods that were known to be those of the peddlers. And that's really why they started looking at him when he got caught. However, the records show he did die a natural death. And he was buried in a graveyard in a small town on Hawk Mountain. His gravestone is gone. It was stolen years and years ago. And there's just a blank spot there. But everybody knows where his grave is. If you go up on Hawk Mountain now, which Hawk Mountain was also, and I'll get to that in a second, was an area for the Bhundy Indians, and you are near the old Schambach Tavern at night, which is the caretaker's house. The caretaker of Hawk Mountain still lives in this house. You will see and hear things around the property, but you have to be careful because somebody lives there, and they will call the police. They're sick of people coming up to their home at night. But it never got much better there. The next man to live in the house sort of lost his mind and started talking about evil spirits in the house at night. Nobody saw him for a while. They went up there, and what they found was the door ripped off the hinges, blood everywhere, and no sign of the resident. If the Schambach story is true, and keep in mind, there's really no historical record one way or the other on whether or not the Schambach story is true. It's an interesting question because the whole legend about that area is that the Bhundy Indians viewed Hawk Mountain as a cursed land. Back before the Schambach. We're going to have to disagree on the Schambacher. Because it has been spelled both ways. I've seen the records of when he actually had the tavern. And I shit you not, I have seen the records. And if you want to message me later, Ace, I can tell you where I've seen the records. And it's a fun story because the Port Clinton Hotel, which was a different building then, like a completely different building then, but was one of the main points along that road, is owned by a member of QM's family, and they have all the historical records dating back to that period of time still. But the Bhundis really viewed that as kind of like this haunted area, this just amazingly strange and mysterious and kind of really weird area. And the fun part about that is they always viewed Hawk Mountain as being especially bad. The reason they viewed it as being especially bad is they thought spirits were all over the place. Now, one night I was driving up Hawk Mountain, and I forget why. There's a road that most people take. Most people don't go through that area at night. Most people go up State Road 61 to I-78 and then take that to wherever you need to be. You don't really have to drive over the fucking mountain to get anywhere unless you want to or you know somebody who lives on that road. But something like there was an accident or something on 61. And I decided I was going to go over the mountain to get into Hamburg, which Ace knows where I'm talking about, but to get into Hamburg and then go from there. And I'm going over the mountain, and in the woods, I see this giant blue shape outlined, like glowing blue shape outlined in the woods. And it's moving. I mean, I'm going about 30, 35 miles an hour. It's moving alongside. It scared the shit out of me. Later, I would find out that that's one the things that happens on Hawk Mountain is you see this giant, almost Bigfoot-like size shape outlined in blue. A more personal story, though, about the Bhundis is regarding QM's family farm. QM's family farm, and I'm not going to give too much here, is, you know, like poltergeist and shit, and the ancient Indian burial ground stuff. My partner's family farm actually does have an Indian burial ground. It has. They have found the older brother is a archaeologist, and he has actually found Bahundi Indian remains there that they do not report. They just stopped telling that section of the land is what they did, because when you report it like that, you sort of lose your land. You can see a native wandering that corner of the land at night. I have seen that with my own eyes. The house on the farm was the scene of a double murder way back in the pioneer days. We discovered this because when the house was being built, it's the second house on the land. There's the old farmhouse, and there's the second house on up a bit. When they were excavating for that second house, they found the remains of what they said were 2 little girls. And the best that they can think is that they were settler girls who were likely killed at some point from the bodies. Now, this was back in the 70s they found these. But that house has always, and this is the house my partner grew up in, has always had incidents. They would always say that little girls came to visit them in their sleep and things like that. Now, one of the more interesting stories was the lady in the closet there. And this, when we first moved here, we moved into that house. We very quickly moved out of that house because I hate my in-laws. But we first moved into that house, and we were there for a few months while we were looking for our own place. And we're sitting there one night. Now, this house didn't have a phone. It doesn't have a connection to the water mains. It's a well water. It had a septic tank, not a sewer. Had electricity, thank God, but there was no internet, and there was no cable television. They didn't run it out there. So you pretty much, when you got there, you had no contact with the outside world. You didn't even really have cell phone service there. Unless you walked out and back up into the woods, then you could get some cell phone service. But the fun part about that was there was the woman in the closet, and we're sitting there one night and we're watching TV. And we had brought the DVD player. We've got DVDs in, and we're watching. And here's what I hear as we're talking about this. I said, it's a little weird here. And QM looks at me and goes, "Oh, have you seen the woman in the closet yet?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "When we were growing up, my dad would always see the woman in the closet." And I look at her and I go, "Well, what do you mean?" "He would be here alone, and a woman would come out of the closet dressed in old things. She would just glide out of the closet, and she would look at my father and go, and then disappear back into the closet. And it got so bad that he would refuse to be upstairs in the house when no one else was here, because it only happened when he was here." Now, my first opinion was, well, the ghost obviously knows your father's an asshole. My second thought was, oh my God, that's going to happen to me. If we stay here, that's going to happen to me. I'm going to be sitting on the couch one night, flipping through a fucking law book, and a ghost is going to come out of the fucking closet pointing a finger at me, and I'm done. I'm done. I'm fat. I'm overweight. I'm not that healthy. I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm going to die. We're going to have another fucking ghost here. It'll be the fat man on the couch. There'll be the 2 girls, the ghost and the woman in the closet, and the fat man on the couch. So we moved out very shortly after that and found another place to live while I was in law school. But yeah, those are the types of places that I have lived, and that's the type of places that I did live. Interesting fact, the place we moved to, literally right across the street from a cemetery. I could sit on the front porch smoking cigarettes or having a drink on a nice night on our front porch, and I would be staring directly into a graveyard. It did not bother me as much as the chance of there being a woman in the closet. Funny story about that graveyard, though. Did you guys know they make tombstones that project holographic images above the grave? Because I sure as fuck didn't. No shit, they make tombstones that like present. It's just like right above the fucking gravestone. It's just like a holographic picture, and it goes right up above there. It's really kind of neat if you see it in the daytime. But I sure fucking didn't know that. I didn't know that until the first really dark night we were there, and I walked outside at like 2 a.m. for a fucking cigarette, and looked across the graveyard, and there was a disembodied head sitting at about waist level in the graveyard, staring at the fucking front porch. I had no clue until then. But you have that everywhere. You have those types of stories, and it's really neat. The part of Louisville that I grew up in has those types of stories. The area of Louisville I grew in was in the southern part of Jefferson County, which wasn't Louisville proper when I was growing up. It was a different. It was just called the county. But the area I grew up in used to be just kind of a little way area, because there used to be the city of Louisville. Then you have a little bit of farmland. Then you would have these swamps. And these swamps would be there, and then there would be the other side. And in the middle of the swamps above the wetlands was the area that I grew up in now. And those swamps were known to be just a bad fucking place to go. The bandits and the highwaymen and the robbers and the murderers, they hung out in those swamps, because those roads, if you came in from the state to go to Louisville to sell goods, you had to go through the swamps, and they would kill people there, put them in the fucking woods, or put them in the fucking swamps, and they drain that swampland. They start building it up. But it was not uncommon when I was growing up to hear the stories of driving one of these roads in this semi-developed area at night, and just all of a sudden have the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. There was one called Hot Rod Haven, and our Hot Rod Haven, every town has a Hot Rod Haven. Our Hot Rod Haven had a verifiable story with it. Excuse me. Guys, I'm going to pause the stream for just a second. Enjoy some music. Sorry, guys, the rest of the Badger family walked in, and I wanted to make sure that was them. But anyways, Hot Rod Haven up there was really interesting. It was a graveyard at the top of a hill, and there were a bunch of old families up there. It was on Mitchell Hill Road, and Mitchell Hill Road was very strange. A girl had died there going to prom. She had been going to prom, and they'd had hairpin curves the whole way through. And she's going down Mitchell Hill Road, and in her boyfriend's car, and they missed one of the turns. They went off the side of the hill. And she was buried up there. And this was a verified story. You could look up the newspaper listings from the night she died. It only happened in like the 60s. Everybody seeing the dog? Trey, come here. Say hi. This is my three-legged moron. My three-legged moron who I've now called over here so you could at least see him hop through the room. But it was really freaky because you would go up there and you would park and you could see across to the graveyard, and it was a big thing to park there at night and look across and wait for something to happen. Somebody asked if I ever went to the abandoned insane asylum in Louisville. Let me ask, which one do you mean? Because there's one that was an abandoned insane asylum, and there's one that was not an abandoned insane asylum, but everybody thinks it was. if you mean Central State Hospital, yeah. Yes, I have been to Central State Hospital. That was the Kentucky Central State Asylum for the Criminally Insane, and that literally was the name. And that is now on the grounds of E.P. Tom Sawyer Park. Now, Central State itself is still there. It's just a much more modern building. But the old building was there when I was growing up, and yeah, we used to sneak over to it all the time. The problem was at that time, Central State Hospital, the new one, still owned that land. So being caught on it was a criminal offense. And there were hidden graveyards all around Central State. The best story I have is one year, I think I was a freshman in high school, I had a friend who lived on the other side of E.P. Tom Sawyer Park. And we walked out at night on Halloween night to the old abandoned Central State building, which was this big Gothic architecture building. And they were getting ready to tear it down at that point in time. But they had gates, but we're over by there, and this car comes by and the window's down. Somebody screams at us, and we jumped like 20 fucking feet in the air. And then we had to walk by the new Central State Hospital to get back to the main road to get back to his house. So we walk by, we get to his house, and his mother, it's like 2 a.m. His mother is furious. She's awake. She's scared to death. We ask her why. We're 13, 14 years old. She looks at us and she goes, the phone rang right after you left. And we're thinking, well, what's big deal? But our friend who lived there knew what the big deal is. See, any time that they thought they had people missing, the counts came up small at the newer hospital. There was a special ring that everybody within a certain mile radius got. And it was ring, no ring. 2 rings, no ring. 3 rings, no ring. And that was basically your symbol. Make sure all your doors and windows are locked. Hunker down, don't open the door for people. We may have lost one of our criminal inmates. Like right after we had left, they gave that signal. And it turns out, like the next day, we found out 2 convicted killers had escaped the Central State Detention Wing that evening. They were caught. But where they caught them was at this lake across from the hospital. And we walked right by that lake. So 3 rather young teenage boys on Halloween night likely directly crossed paths with 2 escaped killers. Now, if what you're talking about when you say the old abandoned asylum is the Waverly Hills Sanitarium, not sanatorium, but maybe sanatorium. I think it is sanatorium. One of them is a mental hospital. The other one is not. The other one is a tuberculosis hospital. That is what Waverly Hills was. Waverly Hills was built in the early 20th century for a tuberculosis epidemic. Tuberculosis was known as the White Death. And Louisville had a horrible, horrible tuberculosis epidemic at that time. Now, the area around it's pretty built up now. A lot of subdivisions, a lot of little stores. As a matter of fact, Waverly Park, which is at the top of that hill, is where Waverly Hills is now a golf course. But at that point, it was just this open air area, and they built this huge Gothic, again, hospital up there with these huge open areas for the fresh air in the country, and really to get the people with tuberculosis out of the city. Not very many people would leave Waverly Hills. Normally, if you went up there, you were being quarantined, and you would likely die in the hospital. By one count, at one time, they had a person dying every 2 to 3 hours in the hospital. The rate of death was so large. They had these tunnels that led from the hospital all the way down to the bottom of the hill. The tunnels were originally there for supplies, fresh food, fresh fruits, medicines, things like that, because they didn't want delivery men, and most delivery men would actually refuse to go up to the hospital to deliver for fear of becoming infected. At one point, what they ended up doing was using those tunnels to move bodies down to the bottom of the hill so the hearses and ambulances could pick up the bodies there. The idea being they didn't want the patients to see how many people were dying. That has made it be called the death chute in popular culture. It is referred to as the death chute. Have I been to it? Yes. You done? There was when I grew up in Louisville, you didn't come of age without sneaking into Waverly Hills at some point. And is it haunted? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's haunted. There's stories about that place all over the place. There's a little girl in a hallway that if you roll a ball, she'll roll the ball back to you. There's room 502 up on the top floor, which is where they say they kept the criminally insane people. But it was the site of a nurse's suicide. There was a gentleman who worked at the hospital, who still lived on the hill, who remembered that a nurse had killed herself because she had gotten pregnant. And you got to remember, this was back when you couldn't be single and pregnant, especially not in the South. A homeless man actually fell down one of the elevator shafts at one point and died. And they say you can still see him walking through the elevator shaft. A woman, a patient at one point, killed herself, slit her own wrists, and ran out the front door of the hospital. And they say you can still see her ghost. I knew some security guards as we came of age who went up there and worked, because they always had security on site, who would flat out say that they refused to go in the building. They were outside security only at that time. It has since been purchased by Charles and Tina Mattingly, who have done a lot of work on restoring it. We didn't know what to do with Waverly Hills for a long period of time. At one point, they were going to tear it to the ground. At another point, somebody was going to build a statue of Jesus on top of it and turn it into an amusement park. There was talk of turning it into a hotel. I think they're still talking about doing that, actually, or condos. And there's been talk of restoring it. The funny thing about Waverly Hills is the last tuberculosis patient there didn't die until like the 70s or 80s. I mean, this was somebody who spent the majority of their life in that hospital. Well, after tuberculosis had stopped being an issue everywhere else. I believe it's a vaccination now. You just get a vaccination. But the last person there didn't die until the 70s or 80s. There's people in this room who were alive when the last resident of Waverly Hills for tuberculosis died. However, as it went down in that number, they had all this open space, and it was a waste to use it, so they turned it into a rest home, a nursing home as well, another part that wasn't treating the tuberculosis patients. The Waverly Hills nursing home was closed down because they were horribly abusing their patients. So there's a lot of anguish and things that are probably in that building. And I would say if there's one place in this world that is probably haunted, it would be Waverly. And everybody growing up, though, we all knew about Waverly, and we all had stories about sneaking into Waverly and harassing the guards at Waverly and running around Waverly, and that was kind of, but it is really spooky, because you go by this golf course to go up the hill, and then about halfway up the hill there's a chain, so you park your car, and then you walk around the chain, and you walk the rest of the way up, and it's just this dark road. There's no electricity. The only power is a generator to the guard shack. It was really frightening, to be honest. So yeah. Oh my Lord, guys! You've ran me out of a lot of stories tonight. I sang every song I came in ready to sing. We're now with me struggling to talk about shit as I'm discussing Waverly Hills and having done like 8 shots. So let's say that 11:22 on a Friday may be a good time to start wrapping it up. And say a 2.5 hour broadcast is probably great for a first one with this. But let me ask, how'd you guys like this one? I'm going to watch the chat, but how'd you guys like this idea? Because personally, I kind of like the storytelling idea. Old dog Trey. Yes, that is my old dog Trey, Kage. My dog Trey behind me is the stupidest dog I've ever owned and the sweetest dog I ever owned. Every bit of mean in him has been turned into what was in the leg that got cut off when he was a puppy. Unfortunately, every bit of his brains were in that leg too. So he is very, very sweet, but he is very, very stupid at the same time. And those are both an endearing and a dangerous conversation. So it seems like everybody loves this. So I'm going to do, and I appreciate that. I'm going to do two things because I'll probably bring this back. I sort of like this front porch feel I've got going on, and maybe I'll actually set it up on the front porch next time I do it. The first one is I'm going to sing one song that means a lot to me. I'm a native Kentuckian. We all grow up hearing this song. If you watch the Derby, you'll notice that we all sing it. So I've got this, and then I'm gonna say my good nights. Oh, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, the people are gay. Oh, the corn cobs ripe and the meadows are in bloom, and the birds make music all the day. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. By and by hard times come a-knocking at the door of my old Kentucky home. Good night. Weep no more, my lady, oh, weep no more today. For we'll sing once more of my old Kentucky home, of my old Kentucky home far away. Yes, Kage, I know you earned a slightly older version of the song. We actually, Kentucky officially changed those lyrics a little while back. And the last part of this evening is I'm going to do just a very quick toast to everybody who watched and everybody who joined me tonight. Guys, if you liked it, thank you very much. If you want to toss money at me for doing it, there's links at the bottom of the fucking description. If you want to go to the Patreon's down there as well. There's all that stuff. But let me just kind of give you my toast. If you have drinks, raise them. May the road rise to meet you, and may the sun be always at your back. May your journey be long, but your trip home be short. And may you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead. Guys, it's been really pleasant. I really enjoyed doing this with you. I look forward to doing it again. If you want to shoot me ideas on the next time we do the front porch, please, for the love of God, shoot it to me. It's Boozy at lawyersandliquor.com. You can follow on the YouTubes and the Twitches and all of that shit. There's shit down below if you want to toss money at it. If you don't, hey, that's cool. I'm just glad you're here. I'll talk to you guys again soon, and you have a really good night.